And UFC was not alone in the ferry business. By 1854, the Greenpoint Company was buying old boats from UFC and launching their own services with 5 boats by 1858. The Boston, the Iola, the Asbury, bought from UFC, the Greenpoint, and the Martha. The last of those 2 collided at the Greenpoint dock in February 1859, fortunately with no loss of life. Obviously, the UFC took the usual no action that actually improves anything tactic that New Yorkers of today are familiar with, and in 1856, someone known only as a sufferer is writing to the New York Tribune on behalf of commuters. Sir, may I claim a corner in your influential journal for the purpose of bringing before the public what sort of increased accommodation the Union Ferry Company afford the inhabitants of Brooklyn, and particularly that portion of them who have the good fortune to be obliged to cross the Hamilton Avenue ferry daily. This morning I left my residence in Brooklyn, in season to arrive, as I expected, at my place of business in New York at 8 o'clock, the hour I am required to be there. I went on board the ferry boat Gowanus at 7:30 o'clock. The boat being crowded, I was obliged to stand outside. I opened the Tribune and applied myself very industriously to the examination of the election returns. Being deeply absorbed in my patriotic employment, I did not find the time passing, but happening to look up, I observed we were just abreast of Governor's Island. I pulled out my watch and found it was just 8 o'clock. Now, sir, observe, it takes the Union Ferry Company's boat Gowanus half an hour to go from her slip to Governor's Island, a distance of less than 3/8 of a mile, and the boat, too, crowded with passengers, anxiously hurrying to meet their various engagements. Upon inquiry, I learned that the Gowanus spent her time in some futile attempts to tow another ferry boat into the river from where she had been laying up. Now, sir, I submit, if one boat cannot get out of her dock without the assistance of another, it certainly should not be at the expense of the precious time of a great number of people who are all feverishly anxious to arrive at their various places of business in proper time to meet, perhaps, important engagements. Every person who is obliged to cross by the Hamilton Avenue ferry is fully aware that the boats of that neglected ferry are not any too fast, nor their trips made any too often without taking one loaded with passengers to assist in towing other boats about the river. I would ask the Union Ferry Company through you, sir, is this a specimen of the increased accommodation for which a patient and enduring public are compelled to pay an increased and increasing rate of ferriage? Now that the presidential struggle is over, perhaps you would assist me with your powerful advocacy and great influence in arousing public opinion to the extent of the impositions practiced upon the residents of Brooklyn by the magnanimous Union Ferry Company. Yours, a sufferer. 1 year later, nothing has changed. Friday, August 7, 1857, the New York Herald. The Greenpoint Ferry. Meeting of the people. Public grievances. Ferry monopoly. A mass meeting of the citizens of the upper part of the city and also of Greenpoint was held last evening at the foot of 23rd Street opposite the ferry for the purpose of taking into consideration the propriety of petitioning for better accommodations on the part of the ferry company and suggesting to them the advisability of running suitable boats as at early and late an hour as on the ferry at 10th Street. From all we could learn, the accommodations are certainly of a most miserable description, but one boat being run, and that a dilapidated, worn-out concern, which commences its trip at 9 in the morning, not a very seasonable hour for working men, and quits running at 7 or a little after in the evening, whereas the 10th Street ferry runs 2 or 3 boats, commencing their trips at about 5 a.m. and closing at 1 a.m., and the object of the present meeting was to obtain, if possible, the same regulations at 23rd Street.